And God said, yes, son, but it's more than that. Well, I'm a smart aleck, and I was a man of God, and I know the right answer. You know the right answer too, Mike. You're probably listening, and the right answer was that, well, it's what you did on the cross, Jesus. That's what it's about.
Well, welcome to the True Man Podcast. You know, I used to toss around sayings and ideas like, that was a chance encounter, or I got lucky meeting that person, or, what are the possibilities of me meeting that person? Now, I met today's guest, Jay Gardner, at our annual, I'm a part of the Christian Businessmen's Connection, CBMC Atlanta annual partnership luncheon. And I immediately wanted to hear more about his story. And what I love about this, and I've come to realize, is there is no such thing as a chance encounter. And when you're aligned with God, he has a wonderful way of connecting you with people that are on the same mission as you to serve, connect, and create a world of peace, love, and hope by utilizing our story. After all, your story is a part of the larger story in God's kingdom. So let's meet today's guest. Jay Gardner's story can be best described as one of redemption. I think you're going to find that out. Jay is the president and founder of the organization Torn Pages, whose mission it is to spread the message of hope, peace, and strength. Now, his vision for this organization started from a prison cell when he felt the pain and struggles of everyone around him. Now, we are going to hear more about that story today. Jay, welcome to the True Man Podcast.
Mike, thank you very much. And I'm just excited to be able to have the opportunity to share about Torn Pages and about my life, and especially reaching anybody out there that's going through life's torn pages. We all got that struggle, and
looking
for hope, peace, and strength. And I thank you. Really, it's an honor. Thank you very much.
Absolutely. See, I can see right off the top, you'll appreciate, Jay's desire to help people and enthusiasm. It's something that I gravitated towards right away. And I'm guessing your enthusiasm for life at this point just comes from overcoming some of the addictions that you may have had, and ultimately, paying a little price, right? For past discretions by serving some time. But tell us a little bit about your story and how you got to where you're at today.
Well, I don't know where you want me to be in at, Mike, to be honest with you. I mean,
I don't, if you start with, I was born in, everybody's going to turn it off. So, no, really start with, obviously there's a story there. What happened to you? I read a little bit of your bio, obviously, like a lot of people, there was a little bit of an addiction issue that probably got you into trouble. So, to start with that.
All right. Well, then, the best way to start off is I just like to get out front how smart I am. How about that?
Come on now.
Yeah. And so don't turn it off, because you're going to see how brilliant I really am. So as far as my life starting off, I guess I lived in South Bend, Indiana when I was a little kid. I was about 7 or 8 years old. I moved about 15 times before I was 15 years old. So I was always a new kid on the block. But this story is how smart I was. I was in South Bend, Indiana. It was about winter time. And the kids, the teenagers were always bigger than us, of course. And they were always picking on my little buddy. And they had built a tree fort. So one early morning, we sneak out, big winter boots and jackets. And we're tromping in the icy leaves. And we come across the tree fort first thing in the morning. And we know it's there. It's got beer cans and wood everywhere. And I'm looking up, trying to fix to climb this tree fort. And all of a sudden I hear my little buddy screaming, ah. I'm like, oh my God, they got him. Somebody's got him. And I peep around the big tree, and he's on the ground, Mike. He's just he's rocking and holding his boot. I run over there and I said, what's up? What's up? He's like, ah. And I find what? And I find what he's doing, he's pointing to a nail inside on a board. He's trying to tell me that this nail, that big little nail, went through his big winter boot. I'm like, man, there ain't no way that way.
Ouch.
You know what I did? I said I was so smart. I knew for a fact that nail didn't go through the boot. So I lifted up my little leg as high as it went, and I slammed it on that nail, man. And you know what happened? Wah! And that's how smart I am, Bo. And I tell you what, that was the first time. I was about 7 or 8 years old. It was a couple weeks later. We had to get testing shots, but I was hanging out with the teenagers at the tree fort, drinking beer and smoking weed, around 7 or 8 years old, and didn't know that would be a nail in my mind and in my heart all the time. It was just the insanity of the disease. But you know what? I was always smart enough when I was ever at a construction site. I was always looking for nails in a board, but I couldn't see that. I could never recognize that with my addiction, and that's how it started. That's how my addiction started, and it progressed, along all my life. Not as much. It escalated a little bit more. We went from South Bend, Indiana to Puerto Rico. So I lived in Puerto Rico when I was about 10, 11 years old. Escalated there and moved back to North Carolina. Was supposed to go to a night school. I mean, that's where I learned how to fight in Puerto Rico. I mean, anyways, but my addictions were always part of my life. And like I said, we moved around quite a bit. My mom and dad were young kids. They were 15 and 16 when I was.
When you were born?
Yeah. No, they got conceived. I think it was 9 months later, and they got married. So yeah, they were kids trying to raise a kid, and I did the best they could. But we had our struggles growing up, like we all do in many families. My dad was. He struggled, he had anger issues, but we're good friends today. I love my dad, and they're still together. But yeah, I mean, that's one story that introduces my life to addictions and to drinking and drugging, I guess, most of my life as a kid growing up, as far as I can ever remember.
Did you know you had a problem growing up, or were you just surrounded by people doing the same thing and you just thought it was normal?
I just thought it was normal. I mean, I moved around so much that I didn't really know any different. That was just my life. So I just thought that was the way it was. So as a kid, you're growing up. That's how you're growing up, and it was confusing. I mean, to a certain degree, my relationship with God, I had no conception of God at all, none at all, none, and. The only first conception I remember, I was about 12 or 13. I'm sure she talked into me. My great grandmother loved to go fishing. She loved to go catfishing, and catch fish. And she loved Jesus. And she told me about this man, Jesus, she loved and where he was born. And I didn't have no inclination of him, but if my grandmother loved him, he must be one heck of a man that she talked about.
And so she planted a little seed there.
Mm-hmm. She planted a seed, and I grew up very tough, man. I really did. I mean, there was I walked on eggshells in our home because of some issues with my dad, and so it was rough outside my house and it was rough inside my house. I couldn't find no peace nowhere. But my dad came to know the Lord when I was about 12 or 13 years old, right about the same time. And it was the greatest gift that my dad ever brought, because I came to know the Lord, I think, when I was about 12 or 13. And it changed our lives. It was the best year I ever had as a kid, ever. But it didn't last long. But at the same time, I understood who Jesus was with my grandmother. It just all came together. But what happened was that my grandmother experienced a stroke that just left her like an animal. It just took half her body. It was, if you ever seen that, and she was in a nursing home and crying, and so at that age, I was like, it was very confusing. How could a loving God allow somebody to love them so much, right? And then my dad, he ended up going into seminary, but he ended up going into his own ways again, and he gave a persona like we all do in life, don't we? Sometimes we want to
wear a mask.
Yeah, we want to wear a mask, but inside our home, it started escalating again. And, so it was, so I backed away from God and turned my back on God, but he's always been a part of my life ever since then. And, I wasn't, as you can tell, I wasn't that smart. So the
No.
only way I excelled, I struggled in school. I really did. I never read a book hardly. Uh, I did. I cheated. I cheated all my life growing up with my grades and stuff. Nothing I'm proud of, but I was just not that smart of a kid. I could study hard, but I just didn't retain like others. And so I would get the answers in life, but I didn't have any understanding. And God began to show me later on that I'm always looking for answers, but the answers don't do you any good unless you have some understanding.
See, now that's really smart. See, now don't shy away from that. Now that there's so much wisdom in that, Jay, and it's probably the road that you've gone down. I mean, I think, that's where a lot of times we get off track as young people, is that, we want especially now in this culture, right? I call it a fast food culture. We want all our answers now. Jesus, I mean, people are praying and it's like, I need that answer now. Well, that's not how, that's not how God works. But, but the wisdom in it is much deeper than that. And, a lot of people don't recognize that. So talk a little bit about, you gave us a little hint at how your childhood went.
Right.
And I think that, and we talk a lot about this on the show, these fatherhood wounds that show up when we're young, they tend to they show up when we're young, but they catch up with us later because we weren't taught what we necessarily needed to know. So at some point here, you get into trouble, right?
Well, I was natural. I was just gifted at it. There's a story about a little kid on a tricycle, and that was probably me. And, my daddy says, "Hey, don't go outside the front yard. I'm going to whip you, if you go outside that front yard on your tricycle." And, so my attitude with, I even had a little kid on a tricycle. I just got off and, backed up my butt and said, "Well, you might as well go and whip me now, man. I got things to see and places to do, man."
Just get it out of the way.
Just get it out of the way. I was always that. But, life was, I still had the best life I could ever imagine. I had great experiences. I excelled in my course of action for life and success was in sports. And, but I was a gifted athlete, defensive captain, middle linebacker in high school. But unfortunately, in 10th grade, I had a severe accident. I was paralyzed from the neck down.
Oh my!
You can tell I'm not anymore, but it was a bruised spinal cord. But I was paralyzed for about 2 weeks from the neck down to the waist, and then for about 3 months from the waist down in a wheelchair. But of course, I regained my strength and my size, but I could never play sports as far as football, which was my love. And so my years in school escalated with more drugs and activities, and just trying, because I lost my identity. We all try to find so much identity in what we're doing.
Yeah, you gravitate towards what you're comfortable and used to.
Yeah. And so I started getting in more troubles and some more fights, and finally I graduated. I don't know how I did that, but I think it was because I took a drama class and it counted as English because I didn't pass English. And so, but I said, if I want to fight, I might as well join the Navy and become the best #1 fighter in the Navy as a boxer. Yeah. And that's what I did. I had joined the Navy right out of high school. I tell people I was a Top Gun fighter in the Navy. They're like, "Really?" I'm saying, "Yeah." So I was Top Gun fighter with my fist.
There you go.
But with the Top Gun movie coming out, it's like, wow, really? But that's what it was. I ended up being the #1 fighter. That's what I did as my detail in the Philippines and in the Orient, and I became the Westpac champion and qualified for the '84 Olympics in 1984. But all that got red taped. I lost that opportunity because of some jealousy with a Master Chief. But I served my country well, and I thought I would be my escalation of what I did. And I turned pro. I got mixed up with I guess, some heavy people in Japan, which is called the Yakuza, which is Japanese mafia. And I was 19 years old, got married over
Wow.
there, and yeah, but they wanted me to sign. They signed me to I was 20, 21 years. They signed me to a six-figure contract, and at 1984, and I just
Kind of hard to turn that down, isn't it?
yeah, but I was so mixed up in alcohol and drugs still that I didn't really see it then. I knew it was a bump in the road, but I saw how drugs and alcohol were always little bumps in the road and little roadblocks that but I didn't they were really nails in a board, to be honest with you. And
I knew that was going to come up again.
yeah, and then I kept just slamming my foot down on it again that the outcome would be different, but it never was. And eventually got married in Japan, had a beautiful woman in my life, and came back to the States, tried to resume my boxing career, and was just lost, I guess you could say. The fog of drugs and alcohol will do that. And but the final point was, we had two beautiful kids, and life was going pretty good. I had two beautiful kids, but one day, I had a little painting company, and one day one of my guys said, "Hey, let's go get a few beers and drink, shoot some pool." And I my life was going pretty well, but that night, the drugs we were going to do was crack cocaine, and that was the demise of my ending of everything I knew was perish. It was just precious in my life.
Yeah,
it to me, it's one of the worst diseases and worst drugs out there in the world because it's just so escalating. I know there's a pandemic with heroin and that drug that's taking kids' lives, but I was in, I was trying to recover from that disease, and I did find hope. I found hope in the church, and God had took that obsession, and by the grace of God, I found recovery in the church, and God had redeemed me, and I was a man of God for about 4 years in a well-grounded church, and knew I was supposed to go to the ministry. And the last part of my story that escalated, leading to torn pages, which we'll definitely talk about.
Yeah,
is that the day I got ordained, that night, it was like God just took his hand off of me, Mike. And I experienced demonic voices and also demonic visions that were, it was
on the very day you were ordained.
Yeah, the very day I was ordained. Yeah. And I tried to battle that fight for about 3 months. I was counseling, fasting, praying with my minister and my men and my elders and my men in church. And I just, it was not going away. And like I said, if you're picking at me, I could do something about that. I can handle that. And if there's 2 or 3 guys, I could probably handle that. Maybe not at 60 now, but I was fighting a spiritual warfare that I had no power to overcome except for the grace of God. And I thought God had thrown the flag in on me and turned his back. And I turned my back on God, and I lost my family, my kids. I mean, I was hopeless state of mind and body, and I walked away from life. I felt defeated. I felt unworthy as a father, and it was the end of my life pretty much. I went and just dived into the drug world, trying to escape the demons that were just chasing me, and that's where the gavel, the church found, before all that happened, the church sent me to a like a place or like a rehab, just because they still believe the calling on my life, even when I relapsed. And the only thing I remember at this church, at this place, the next following week, and don't get me wrong, my wife had reason to leave me, but unfortunately, the next week, my wife didn't show up, and within 90 days, I was separated divorced, and she was married to one of my superintendents. And when all this was going on, and it's not, I don't blame anybody. Trust me, man. I take responsibility, but it was just it was like the feather on the last little pebble. It just broke me down, and I didn't care. And but the funny story is, even when I was at this little rehab at in this place called Penfield Christian Homes, I don't remember anything except this one story. You had to work a little bit, about a couple hours a day, just to for just to get your mind back in the groove. And but there was it was out in the country, and this old he about 80 years old, old overalls and jaw in his mouth, and old country hat, and I'm a worker. I'm baling hay for the first time in my life ever, you know. And at the end of the day, he's like, "Boy, you a worker, boy, you a worker." I'm like, I said, "Yeah." He said, "I'd love to have you out here on my farm." I said, "But let me ask you. Now it's out in the country." I said, "Let me ask you, Pops." I said, "What do y'all pay your good old country boy out here anyways?" He helped pull that chaw out, Mike, and he spit. He said, "Well, we pay him just enough to live, but not enough to move."
There you go.
That was the best thing I got out of that, man. And I never forgot it. And but my life just spiraled after that. And then the end came when I went on a crime spree. After 2 years in the drug world, I went on a crime spree for about 2 weeks, and I was robbing some hotels and restaurants as the gentleman bandit. You don't know that story, do you?
No.
The gentleman bandit, yeah. So they did. They arrested. I was So I didn't have a gun, and I finally got extradited from Kentucky, and this was 2 years. This is 1997, and I finally get to a place called Gwinnett County up here outside of Atlanta.
Mm-hmm.
And the detectives came in. He said, "Man," he says, "your case beats everything we've ever seen." I'm like, "Really?" I'm like, "What's up?" He said, "Well, the media called you the gentleman bandit." I'm like, I wasn't watching any television then. I said, "So what's up with that?" He says, "Well, every victim said you're friendly. Said two of them said you're cute." He said, "But I'll be damned." He said, "A manager at a hotel said he would have hired you for a job under different circumstances." He said, I said, "That's funny." I laughed too.
I've never heard anything like that.
Yeah, that's what they said as detectives. They've been there for 20 years. They said, "I've never heard anything like that." I said, "Well, that's funny." I says, "But why are they trying to give me a life sentence? And I've never been arrested before, never been incarcerated, never been in prison." And that was my plea offer, Mike. That was my plea offer.
Yeah.
And he said, that's the other thing we've never seen, and we've never seen a plea offer under your circumstances of a crime like this, where your plea offer was life. And my lawyer had to come in. He didn't believe it either, and but they wouldn't come off of the life offer. But what had happened, what people don't know, is that in 1995 they privatized prisons. Did you know that?
No.
Yeah. So they privatized prisons in 1995. Boom! Overnight, prisons became a $1 billion industry. So what did they do? Now they had hotels. Prisons were hotels. They sent lobbyists throughout all the United States to what? To get tough on crime.
Yeah.
That's what the public need to know. Get tough on crime. It had nothing to do with getting tough on crime. It only had to do about having hotels as prisons now and locking a man up as long as he could. And they changed the laws so drastically that they were putting men in prison for as long as they could. And I fell underneath armed robbery. Armed robbery and the federal organization, as far as law, armed robbery is when you brandish a gun, right? And the laws of the state in Georgia, armed robbery merited as anybody thought that you had a gun, just thought that you had a gun, merited as armed robbery. And armed robbery was a 7 deadly sin. And yeah. And so we went to trial. I was guilty, but my lawyer had no choice but try to defend me best he could. And there was a couple that found me guilty, thought that I had a gun. And the DA, since I didn't take the life sentence, the DA said, well, we're going to offer him life with another life running on top of wild of a life, with 10 years running wild on top. And the judge said, you never want to see Mr. Gardner see the light of day. And the judge, it's even in transcript, the judge said, he stood up, he said, I'm not going with y'all's recommendation. He said, Mr. Gardner, he said, I stood up. He says, by what evidence I saw, Mike, he said, the only person that could have got hurt in this crime was you, because I don't believe you had a gun. He said, but I have no choice but by law to sentence you to minimum years of 10 years with no parole. He says, but on one case, I'm going to give this is a girl. I was going to ask her out on a date. And she said she was the only one that could identify me in the courtroom. He said, on this one, I'm going to give you 20 years. And what the judge didn't realize what he just did, he sentences me to 20 years with no parole. And that's what I did. And he even made a mistake. He didn't mean to sentence me to that. The least he could have done was 10 years with no parole. But the laws were so crazy written down that it had one little paragraph that was gray area that any number set down carried no possibility of parole. And he couldn't remand his sentence because he couldn't. That's because if you park in the wrong directions because you don't know that law, you can't go back and say you're not guilty. So,
now, before we get into how torn pages came to you, once you went to jail, I think you're a good person to have this conversation with. Talk about spiritual warfare.
Wow.
This is a conversation that I think, here's the reality. You and I are going through spiritual warfare right now.
Right.
On this podcast, as we talk, there's a battle for our minds. It's the battle between good and evil. It's the battle between God and the devil.
Right.
And a lot of people have not made this connection. Now, and so I'd love to hear you talk about this spiritual warfare that went on with you and really how it took control of your life.
Yeah. Well, like I said, the only thing I can share is I don't know why. I mean, I have an explanation, but it's got me stuttering, man. I mean, it's I don't think about the perplexities of it too much. Is that if it was me, I think there's other people also that have thoughts that go in their minds.
Oh yeah,
and they got to do this and they got to do that, and that you're no good, and you're
Jay, and that's why I bring it up because it's not, those thoughts are not your own.
Right.
So that's the devil putting thoughts in you.
Right.
And a lot of people don't understand this battle, and that I'm kind of picking at you a little bit because you're on here, but I thought it would be great for you to talk about it because it is a very hard thing to, put your finger on sometimes.
It is, I couldn't escape it. I don't know where some people fight them more than others. It could have been, some people say it could have been a mental health breakdown. I don't know. I don't believe so. I believe mine was spiritual in nature. And there was just, and we all experience the negativity or the thought process that we have towards ourselves. And the spiritual, I don't know the depths of that, to be honest with you, too much, Mike. I just know that I endured it. I know there's a lot more people that endure it even more so. I guess the conception, is that, we don't have, honesty was our first demise as a spiritual warfare that we endured. Meaning that as little kids, we grew up lying as knee knockers. We didn't, it just came natural to us. And so that's ingrained. Did you take that piece of that cookie? No, ma'am, I
Nope.
didn't. Right. Did you do this? Did you hit your sister? No. So even as knee knockers, we already know. And then like procrastination and lust and envy and greed. Those are the spiritual thoughts of the condemnation that just comes naturally to us. Nobody has to practice procrastination. It comes natural, right? I mean, unfortunately, right?
Yeah.
I mean, our best intentions are just demise. So that's the spiritual warfare that it's continually to do. And so one of the greatest gifts God gave me was that there's a saying, before a man ever goes to prison, he was already in prison. That means he was imprisoned by his thoughts, right?
Yes.
And so, and I covet my sobriety very much now. I got years of sobriety with no alcohols and no drinking. I just can't. I suffer from that disease. But what happened? God said, "I'm gonna teach you how to drink properly." And I'm like, "What do you mean?" He says, when I was trying to get sober, he says, "There's always strength in numbers, right? But your association will always be your downfall." Now follow me with this here. And I said, and everybody says, yeah, people, places, and things is always your downfall.
Yeah.
And God says, no, that's not what I'm talking about. I said, what are you talking about then, God? He says the association is in your mind. When you start hanging around lust and pride and greed and envy and dishonesty and deceit, when you start hanging around that crew, right?
Yeah.
It puts you in places where you're going to downfall with people, places, and things. He says the crew I'm trying to introduce you to and live with are my principles, and that is hope and courage and love and discipline, integrity. I'm like, wow. He says that's the crew I want you to hang around with. And so you can just picture, Grace and Faith, they're in the kitchen of my life trying to fix me something good to eat.
Oh, I like that. Yeah.
Integrity and hope, they're sitting on the couch like I am right now trying to find something good on television.
Yeah.
And so that element makes the things that you're talking about, the spiritual warfare, more real and attainable. Discipline, right? And determination, they're outside trying to find and work hard to supply a living. And so God says, this is the crew I want you to fall in love with, man. I want you to hang around with. And it's still a struggle. It's still a struggle to hang around with God's crew, man. I mean, pride is our least, it's our demise. And
no, thanks for saying that, because I think that's an important part of this too, because spiritual warfare is exactly what it is. It's a nonstop war. It's not something that we ever take a break from. But when we have awareness of it, we're you can win the battle more than you lose. And I've come to the conclusion that that's the ultimate goal, is to win more than you lose on this deal, because we're human and we're broken, and we're gonna, things are gonna happen. And by asking you that whole spiritual warfare question, I think I led you right into the creation of Torn Pages. So, so that was by accident, not by design. I'm just not that good. But
I'll tell you the greatest gift that I ever learned, though, is that you can have this up and down relationship with God, but it's having an interpersonal relationship with another human being, not your wife. I'm talking about a man on man, iron sharpens iron. But what happens is there has to be honesty. And when I was trying to recover in my life, my mentors and my sponsors says, Jay, if you cannot be honest with me, I can't help you. And I know there's so many men and so many women hiding behind their pride because they have never ever been truthfully honest with another human being. And our secrets keep us sick. And it's just a tool that the enemy uses. And so when I was able to finally let that pride down and I could trust another human being to share everything in my life, it was the freedom came, the truth of freedom came. It's one thing, God knowing everything. That's and he knows, he knows it anyways. But there's another thing of the element of really one day finding a woman or a man that you can be rigorously honest with, or without no hidden agendas. And there's power in that, because it says confess your sins to one another, but we always confess our sins to God, and there's power in that. And so that's been one of my greatest strengths, that I find that I got 2 or 3 men in my life that they know absolutely everything about me, everything I've done, everything I'm ashamed of, my regrets, everything. And so there's nothing the enemy has. They can say, hey, I got this, and nobody knows about this. And it's just a festering secret that can just grind away at a human being and say, you're still hiding behind lies,
Yeah.
And but that's, and I'm still learning, man.
We're always
always
that's
learning, man.
always, and
Always learning.
till the day of our last breath, it should be that way. So talk, Jay, talk about Torn Pages and how that came to you.
This is where
when you were in prison.
Oh my gosh. So, like I said, if you didn't hear it in what I've already shared, I was sentenced to 20 years in prison with no parole. Right? That's still hard to fathom that that's what I did.
Yeah.
And that was I got out in 1997, right? So I went in 1997, got out in 2017. So when I was in prison, I just got sentenced, and I went to the state penitentiary. Guy was trying to work in my life. And in prison, lots you see the TV shows. A lot of them are true. A lot of them are very, very fabricated to a certain degree. A lot of them have reality. But in prison, if you ever see the pictures, there's no pictures, there's no colors, and there's no gifts in prison. There's no arts and craft, everybody having a good time. It's prison, right?
Yeah.
Well, one day I see a man wearing a necklace, something like this. It was a necklace, and it had beads, right? If anybody's looking, it's got beads.
Yeah, if you could see that on video. I've got the ones you gave me right here.
Yours is better color, right? Mine had a cross on it. Or the one that I saw this guy wearing one, and I was like, dude, how did you get beads in here to make that? He says, Jay, it's not beads, it's paper. I was what? Yeah, all that stuff right there is paper.
Yeah.
Right? And I was mesmerized. Mike. I had to have it. It had color in it, and it was a gift. Things you don't have in prison.
Right.
And later that evening, it wasn't even nighttime. I was in my cell upstairs, 2-man cell, Oglethorpe, Georgia, maximum security. And God knocked on my heart, and he asked me the question. He said, son, I said, yeah, Father. And I've had some neat conversations with God. Some people say he don't speak to you, but I've had some neat ones. But he asked me a question. He said, son, do you know what you got? And mine had a cross on it. And so I was focused on the cross. And I said, yeah. I said, it's about your grace and your love, Father. He said, yes, son, but it's more than that. I said, okay, well, it's about your forgiveness and your mercy then, right? And God said, yes, son, but it's more than that. Well, I'm a smart aleck, and I was a man of God, and I know the right answer. You know the right answer too, Mike. You're probably listening, and the right answer was that, well, it's what you did on the cross, Jesus. That's what it's about, right?
Yeah.
He said, yes, son, but it's more than that. I don't know anything about more than the cross in my life as my Christianity walk. And I said, then what I have, God? And I'm sitting in a Georgia prison cell, 17 more years to go. And I said, then what I got, God? What I got? He says, son, it's made out of torn, ripped pieces of paper. And I said, yes, so. He said, son, it's a reflection of the pages that have been torn and ripped in your life. That's all you had to say, Mike. Tears begin to run down my eyes. Every single one of my regrets, my shame, my torn pages all came up at one time. It was too much. I couldn't handle it.
Yeah.
You know, and God reached in. He said, "Wait a second, son." He says, "I can take the torn pages of your life and create something beautiful in my caring hands." And at that moment, it gave me a hope and a peace and a strength that I knew I could prevail another 17 years in
Mm.
prison. And that's how Torn Pages was born in that Georgia prison cell. I knew right then and there that I had me a gift that was going to impact the world, because there's so many people that got torn pages in their lives.
Yeah.
And there's so many people that are looking for hope, peace, and strength
Yep.
to prevail in this life's journey. And now we have a gift. And so that's how it began. And I started making them and sending them out. And I figured it would, from inside a Georgia prison cell, it would begin to touch people's lives beyond the measures of the walls. But if you go to my site, tornpages.org, and you look at the video, there's about four stories that are on that video, and from people's lives that were touched by somebody else taking the gift, wearing one, and sharing the gift of torn pages, right? With hope, peace, and strength.
Yeah, and I just want to say, so when I met Jay, he was with his wife, and they gave me this bracelet, and it kind of blows me away, to be perfectly honest with you, Jay. I mean, it's what goes into you make bracelets? You break necklaces too? What?
We gotten away from the necklace. The necklaces are going to be rear view. They hang them from a rear view mirror. Pretty much.
Yeah.
It's paper and it's very lightweight, so it doesn't really hang real well as a necklace.
Yeah,
but they're very popular as bracelets.
Yeah.
And,
So it's made out of paper, and then you put a varnish over the top of it, and they're very colorful. They're very neat, and I think equally as important is the message behind it that really impressed me. So when you're in prison and this vision, God gives you this vision, how did you start? How were you able to capitalize on that when you're in jail? I mean, short of just making the bracelets, how do you, and I don't mean money wise. I don't mean, listen, how do you begin
there was
to
never no money. There was never, what I was doing, making these in prison to this day still is contraband. That's contraband. It's contraband. When I was making in prison was contraband. I had more confiscated in prison in the 17 years I did these than I ever had get sent out in the chain gang. And but you know, they did have magazines, so you had magazine papers, and then you had some envelopes and stuff like that. So the paper and the magazines were easy to acquire. The glue I got from sneaking in from the education department. So I had glue. They give you
sorry, the things you don't have to think about, right?
Wow,
I mean,
yeah. So and I was okay, and I'm still okay to this day. I've got some guys, even though I'm working with the Department of Corrections. You know, it was I looked at it like sneaking Bibles into China, you know, or sneaking Bibles into Afghanistan. I was sneaking these things out. But yes, I acquired glue. I had to pay for it from the guys, and everything's a hustle. Prison is a city within a city.
Yeah.
That's all it is. And the only thing they cared about, and that, like I said, there's so much I can expose to the public, and I will eventually. I'll tell you a little bit more later. All they cared about was you had a locker this big, right? Had your underwear and all your worldly possession was in this locker, and only thing they cared about was how you folded your underwear and your clothes, and that if your floor was shiny with wax. And so the other element I needed in prison was wax, and so I had a supply. So I would buy wax from the guys that worked in that department, and so I would store it, and I would I had me a little operation. I had guys that didn't have any money coming in, And we were making these beads and rolling beads and making bracelets and making necklaces.
See, that's why I had you on the podcast. I knew the story would get better when I heard it from. All right, so let's all right, so you get out of prison. Let's jump ahead here. You get out of prison, and now you got this vision,
right?
And this talk about where Torn Pages finds itself today.
Oh my
what
God.
are talk God. About what you're building and what God. It's all about.
Well, like I said, when I first got out, I knew I had something special. I knew I had some, working with recovery, but
yeah,
I was ate up with fear. Even though I had me a good network, I got sober my last 7 years in prison. I wasn't always a good guy in prison, even when I was doing. I ran a gambling operation. I ran a drug ring in prison for about 7 years. So, this is Intel stories, but I didn't see anything wrong with that. My justification is they played, old women played bingo in Baptist churches, so a little gambling in prison, and a little weed smoking wasn't that bad in prison, but you could justify anything you want. But I finally got sober my last 7 years in prison. But when I got out, I didn't know how I was going to do how I was going to. I got out, man. I was 54 when I got out, Mike. I was 54. I'm 60 now, a little over 6 years, going on 7 years now. And I said, well, I'll get back into painting, and I got into painting. I drummed up my painting business and became successful in that area. Stayed sober best I could, and but in the background, I started investing all my money in Torn Pages. It didn't used to be called Torn Pages; it used to be called Beads and Reflections. That was the name of it. But as I started talking to churches and reaching out, I finally went to one church, and they said, why don't you name it Torn Pages?
Oh, I love it.
Because on the back, even with bars, Beads and Reflections, it says on the back of it, it says it's a gift for you. You can't get one without a card, right? Because like you said, it's all about the message. And it says, this is what it says. It says, this keepsake was made by hand with torn ripped pieces of paper, sealed and varnished. It's a reflection of the pages that are torn and ripped in your life. However, God can take the torn pages of your life and create something beautiful in his caring hands, a hope and a peace and a strength to be on life's journey. That's what makes Torn Pages more powerful.
It's absolutely powerful.
And so I always be indebted for that young lady in that church gathering when I sat around this circle with the pastor and his people, his inner circle. And Torn Pages was born about 4 or 5 years ago. And so I knew the only vision that I had was that they be made in third world countries, because I knew just the red tape with trying to get them made in prison, which I'm already enduring now. So now we have 30 women in Uganda. We give a livelihood to, Mike. We don't give them missions. We give them a livelihood. These women in Uganda have been praying over Torn Pages for the last 4 years. And last year and a half, we support 30 women with a livelihood. Their livelihood supports 130 children and grandchildren in 3 villages. That's just one of the after effects. But the other part is that right now, Torn Pages is touching people's lives left and right. And now that I'm free, man, it's just coming together. Like you said, you've got a beautiful site on your podcast. It looks great. Man, I am still at the grassroots of what's going on. But this started in
That's why we're trying to spread the word here.
It is being spread, man. I thank you so much. But it's grassroots. Nobody hardly knows about Torn Pages at all. They might know about the bracelets and the paper beads, some of them, but nobody has a clue what's going on with Torn Pages. And so what's happening now, I'm a free man, and I've just stepped down. It's scary. I've just stepped down from my position owning my company. I still own the company, but I've taken my hands off, and I'm devoting my whole mission into sharing Torn Pages with a world that's torn apart.
Yeah.
And there's so many people that got torn pages in their lives. And I've never met anybody say, hey, man, could you use some hope, peace, and strength in your life today? I've never met anybody that says no, man. And that's how we're touching people's lives. and the greatest. It's just amazing. I started knocking on doors. I started knocking on churches, thinking that this would be something they would just gravitate to. But everybody's knocking on church doors. Everybody's wanting their attention, their support, and I'm trying to come in and share. Listen, the church, I can help you reach your community because there's people hiding even in your pews and your congregation
Yeah.
that's
Yeah.
going through life's torn pages, but they're not going to tell you. And they need to experience God's hope, peace, and strength that they might be awakened to his grace and love in a new way. And so that's what's happening today. And I was hustling little arts and crafts shows, and I was banging away, just waiting for opportunities to share. And then finally, I met up with my old pastor, Frank Cox, and because I was getting turned away from even the churches. Yeah, we're interested, but not right now. Uh, but what's happened is uh, the Southern Baptist Conference convention has come on board, and I've had two personal encounters with one is the president of the association now, and one was the vice president of the national. But what they had personal encounters that they've never seen anything that engages people's lives like opening up the door with torn pages. They've never seen anything like it, and they're welcoming torn pages, and they're helping me get grounded. We're already a 501c, but as you can see, I'm still grassroots, and we're trying to get grounded because they want to take this at a national level. And but the most exciting thing that I'm excited about now, and God, it came to me a couple of months ago, and here's the question I ask: how do we get the gift of godly principles back into our schools? How do we do that? I'm going to mention again, how do we get the gift of godly principles back into our schools? Well, the question is, just imagine these as high school colors that these kids will gravitate to.
Yeah.
So what we're doing now, we're looking.
He's holding up the bracelet for those
holding
listening
up
to
the
the
bracelet.
podcast, so you could actually put it in your high school colors, which
High
is
school
really cool.
colors.
And
Right.
and honestly, I think the key here, right, is it's the symbolism. And as you were talking about that, I was thinking to myself, the challenge with, churches a lot of times is, and really us as people is we don't always embrace our brokenness in order to change it.
Man, I'm
And
telling you.
and the symbolism behind torn pages, not just I just love the name because the symbolism behind the bracelet, and I have a lot of things that I wear a bracelet every day. There's specific things I have on my ring so that when I look on it, I can reflect on, certain things that I need to be, as a man in my life, reflect on who the model is. I mean, goodness gracious, for doing the True Man podcast, the ultimate model is Jesus Christ. So,
Sure.
but I, not to steal your thunder, but I love the symbolism behind it. And I think these are things that we need to embrace. Sometimes it's something as subtle as just looking at a bracelet and going, hold on now, don't get angry.
Yeah.
Remember who's in charge here.
That's right. Well, the crazy thing about it is, Mike, if you go to my website, we haven't put on the, we've sort of put Christ in the background because we want to be able to touch everybody's life with torn pages.
Right.
And we have, even the president of the Southern Baptist Convention, Josh, he said, Jay, I said, well, let me get you some, Josh. You can say the story. He says, Jay, I don't want one with the cross on it. And I knew where he was going. I said, what do you mean, Josh? And he says, well, when somebody sees the cross, they can't help but already be prejudiced, right?
Yeah.
One way or another. He says, I just want the story of torn pages because everybody has torn pages and everybody's looking for hope, peace, and strength. Not everybody's looking for Jesus Christ. Do they need him in our specters? Yes. That's what we say. But what do you say to the people that know Jesus Christ, Mike, that love him and adore him, but all of a sudden their child has cancer and they're praying and begging God, and now they're angry at God, confused at God, just like I was as a little boy. And you're trying to tell them, well, all you need is Jesus, and they are confused. That's what's so powerful about Torn Pages. And when he went to go share the story, he couldn't believe how it's so easy. People say, hey, do you know what's going on? People say, no, what? I said, what do you think of these? Oh, they're beautiful. What are they made out of? And they start guessing. They can't help but touch it. I say, touch it. And if they say
Yeah.
paper, they say
Yeah.
paper. I'm like, yeah.
Yeah.
But here's the story. Bam. And we
Yeah.
meet people where they're at, because our lives and our world is torn apart right now, Mike.
Yep.
And right
Yeah.
now, we need the gift of hope, peace, and strength. And that's why even I'll encourage you, Mike. I want you to go on and make
Oh, he's putting me on the
yeah,
spot.
put you on the spot. Is to wear one and share one. Because now it has a way to open up the door to share
Yeah.
your torn pages with somebody else that's going through life's torn pages. You just never know. You have no clue, and it opens up the door. And I'll share one quick story. I was besides all the videos that you'll see, I was beat up. It was last March, wintertime, raining, sleeting. That's how I felt. The churches were denying me. They were turning my back, and I was ready to quit. And I walk into a Publix, a grocery store. It's closing time, just about, with the deli. I was getting something to eat. A lady named Christy. I saw her name tag. Hey, Christy, how you doing? I said, you know what's going on? She said, no. I said, you seen these? Oh, they're beautiful. She tried to guess what they were. I see, it's torn pages, like our world and our life. Could you use some hope, peace, and strength, Christy? And she's on the other side of the deli. And she says, if you only knew. I've never met this woman ever in my life.
Yeah.
I said, well, read the back. There's a story for you, Christy. I could tell she turned the back and she read the story, right? And I could see when she finished, everything changed. She didn't say a word, Mike. She walked around, ran up to me, and grabbed me in a hug.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I hugged her back, and I said, okay, Christy, this is what's going on. She says, I don't know who you are. I said, yeah. And then the tears started coming. And I says, what happened, Christy? What's going on? She says, last Thanksgiving, after the holidays, my husband had stomach issues, came back from the hospital, stage 4 liver cancer. She said it went even 3 weeks later. He passed before the new year.
Mm.
He says, my life's been torn apart, but you come along with this bracelet and the gift of hope, peace, and strength. And I don't know what came over me. I just had to come around and give you a hug.
Yeah.
That's what happens with torn pages. But you can't do it if you're not wearing it and sharing it. And
Yeah.
that's what I want to happen. And that's why we're so excited right now, is to impact our schools, because these kids, I want to touch these kids' lives before they go to prison, before they get the spiritual
Yep.
warfare that's going up in their minds and they can't get out of it. I want to hit them in the chin with hope, peace, and strength, man, and touch their life. And I can't thank you enough, Mike, to let me share my story and impact our world one life at a time.
Absolutely. So Jay, we got to wrap this up.
I know.
But before we do, tell everybody, I'm gonna put this up on the screen here. Tell everybody, how in the world can they get a hold of you and find Torn Pages?
Listen, just go to tornpages.org. Look us up. We don't come up first when you hit the Google thing and all that other stuff, but tornpages.org. We've got a website. You can make a donation. And our donation, the more you give, we want to touch these kids. We want to reach about 100,000 kids. So if you make a donation,
Jay, make it 1 million.
Make it 1 million. Well, that's going to be our next year. But we might make it this year. I don't know, Mike. That's our goal for the next year, is 1 million. But this year, realistically, we're just getting started. We want to reach 100,000 kids. So if you make a donation for like $100, right, you'll reach 10 kids. If you make a donation of $1,000, you'll reach 100 kids. 100 kids will receive a bracelet like this to impact their life.
Yeah.
For $1,000. And then what we want to do, what we'll do is, this is what's so neat about, and we're crossing barriers. We have to, but for every donation that you give, we give back to you a gift of Torn Pages, because our vision is to share, for you to share this gift of hope, peace, and strength. And so when you make a donation for like $1,000, we'll give you 100 bracelets to share.
Yeah.
And so what happens, our goal and our vision right now is, how do we impact the gift of godly principles back into our schools? And so what happens when you make a donation, we want to take half of your donation and fund it into our schools, touch a kid's life. The other we're going to give to you as gifts, and you can touch that. But go to tornpages.org. And it's so, and it's pretty cool. When I was trying to, here, I'll leave this. It's pretty cool. I couldn't write it up, but I was trying to sell my company at one time, and the guy out of the blue says, well, Jay, Torn Pages has the best money back guarantee ever. I'm like, dude, what are you talking about? I'm not trying to give no money back. I said, but you got me. What is it? What's Torn Pages money back guarantee? He says, Jay, Torn Pages guarantees if you don't know one person that needs a gift of hope, peace, and strength, we'll let you keep the bracelet and refund your money double of what you invested in. And I started laughing too, because there's no way, man, if we take time, that we don't know somebody that needs a gift of hope, peace, and strength.
Yeah, I don't think you're going to be giving a lot of money back. Jay, I can't thank you enough for coming on. I'm so glad that we could spread the word here about
thank you so much.
Torn Pages. As I like to do on the podcast, I think we set a new True Man podcast record in terms of length of podcast, but that's okay.
That's okay.
Because it was such a fantastic conversation. So Jay, thanks for coming on, and everybody go out to Jay's website at tornpages.org and check this out. I think it's a worthwhile cause. So Jay, thanks for coming on.
Man, thank you, Mike. And I look forward to following with you. And again, man, thanks people out there. And if you know somebody that needs a gift of hope, peace, and strength, I'm trying to tell you, if you're watching the video or watching this online, this is a great gift to share with somebody. It can touch their life and change their life. And thanks.
There you go. That's what it's all about.
That's what it's
thanks
all
for
about.
Being on, Jay.
Thanks a lot. Peace out. Thanks.